We begin, though, this morning with the latest on the baby formula shortage impacting families across the country. And now Washington is taking action to try to ease the crisis.
Later today, FDA Commissioner Robert Califf will testify before Congress to discuss his agency's response to the shortage. The FDA says it will take weeks to replenish baby formula stock in stores that have been seen mostly empty shelves recently. In response on Wednesday, President Biden invoked the Defense Production Act to boost the supply of formula.
The Defense Production Act gives the government the ability to require suppliers to direct needed resources to infant formula manufacturers before any other customer who may have ordered that good.
Overnight, the House passed two bills to cut red tape for parents buying formula with government assistance and to provide more funding to the FDA, which oversees safety at the plants that make formula. We have team coverage of this crisis. Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Rafa and NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman. Good morning to both of you. Ali, we'll start with you. And those votes in the House, what was in both of those bills and what can we expect going forward?
Yeah, Joe. Well, Congress and the White House, as you mentioned, have been under a lot of pressure to act quicker to help alleviate this crisis. And Congress actually acted quicker than we thought. We thought these two votes would happen today. They happened late last night. The first of these bills passed almost unanimously, and it would expand access to formula during shortages like this. So more formula can be purchased with money from the WIC program. That's that program for low-income women, infant, and children. The other bill to send $28 million in emergency aid to the FDA to, as you mentioned, essentially cut government red tape to make it easier for companies to manufacture this formula, to get it on shelves. This bill was much more divided. All House Democrats voted for this, but only about a dozen Republicans voted for it. So both of these bills now head to the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said that he's hoping to get this passed today. As with so much legislation that we see in this 50-50 Senate, we're already hearing of some roadblocks with Republicans. Actually, Senator Marco Rubio just tweeted a couple minutes ago, the Democrat $28 million baby formula bill is a joke. We don't have a baby formula demand crisis. We have a baby formula supply crisis. So if that is a preview of what's to come on the Senate floor when this is voted on, this is just really a preview of that, Joe.
Yeah, so Josh, let's talk about the source of this. It was a contamination incident that forced an Abbott baby formula plant to shut down, really creating this situation. What's the latest on that, and what else beyond the Defense Production Act is the president doing to try and ramp up supply?
Well, earlier this week, the FDA reached a legally binding agreement with Abbott, that company that runs that plant in Michigan, to get it back up and running once the factory has undergone essentially a checklist that the government has set out for what they need to do, including inspections, testing of their equipment and ingredients, as well as bringing in a third party to monitor to make sure they're doing everything by the book. Once that's in place, the factory says it could be back up and running in about 2 weeks, and it would take about 6 to 8 weeks for product from that factory to reach store shelves. To Surgeon General Vivek Murthy explaining that this is an all-hands-on-deck effort. Take a listen.
What people should also know is that from the president on down, everyone is laser focused on addressing this issue and pulling every lever possible to do so. That's why we are working now to import formula from abroad, to get manufacturers to increase production here, to get the plant that was actually shut down back online quickly, and to actually redistribute product within the United States.
Ali, we mentioned the FDA commissioner is going to be testifying today. Are other hearings in the works? And help us understand just how much pressure lawmakers are putting on the FDA to try and address this shortage.
Well, this is just the latest of several hearings that several committees have called for in response to this nationwide shortage. And this hearing will really give lawmakers the biggest window, the biggest insight into what caused this problem up until this point, and give the lawmakers as much information as possible as to how this crisis got so bad, why it took so long to sound the alarm, and really what could be put into place so that it never gets this bad again. We know that FDA Commissioner Robert Robert Califf is expected to come back also next week on May 25th before the Energy and Commerce Committee. He's expected to appear with other FDA officials as well as the top heads of the 4 major formula manufacturing companies. That's after several committees asked last week for documentation and just evidence of really what's going on and how this crisis got so bad. So this is really just a reflection of this all hands on deck effort from Congress. We've seen some disagreement as to how to help alleviate this crisis, but for the most part, just bipartisan agreement over the fact that something needs to be done, and it needs to be done very quickly, Joe.
Ali Raffar, thanks to you and to Josh Letterman for kicking us off this hour.
Now, Wall Street is looking to rebound today after suffering its worst drop in 2 years. Yesterday, the Dow Jones dropped more than 1,100 points to finish at its lowest close since March 2021. And it wasn't just the Dow, though. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ also suffered in a miserable day of trading, slipping by more than 4%. Joining us now for more on this is Caleb Silver. He's the editor-in-chief at Investopedia. Caleb, good morning. Thanks for joining us. I mean, I know we all know we've been on a roller coaster with the market. In fact, just yesterday we were reporting how there'd been a better day, but there's been a lot of bad days and now this. So why was there such a big sell-off yesterday? And also, do you think we're in for a repeat performance today, or could we see a rebound?
Yeah, we're looking at stock futures pointing much lower again this morning, about 1.5% down. The trading in Asia was terrible. Europe's not looking much better. So we're probably going to get another sell-off to start the day. We'll see if buyers come in the afternoon. We have not seen that lately. We've seen these really big pronounced down days, followed by a couple percent up the next day, followed by 2 or 3% down. That's what you get in a mixed volatility, uncertain environment, and that's what we're in right now. Yesterday, it was the retailers driving down markets. Target reporting very soft earnings. Walmart the day before. Shares of Target fell 25% yesterday, the worst drop since 1987, Black Monday, when the stock market crashed. So investors don't want any part of this uncertainty, and that uncertainty is about inflation, rising interest rates, and the worries that we're going to head into a recession and consumers are not going to continue spending.
And Caleb, what do those big name earning reports really tell us about the American consumer? How are we feeling? How are we spending? And what does that mean?
Well, consumers have been pretty resilient for the past year and a half, 2 years. A part of that was because the personal savings rate hit an all-time high amid the pandemic due to those government distributions. But lately, we're seeing consumer spending back off a little bit. What Target was telling us and Walmart the other day is that consumers are now bargain shopping. They're spending less when they go into their stores, and they're going into their stores less frequently. Plus, these retailers are dealing with their own input costs and inflation. Producer prices are up 10%. Consumer inflation's up 8.5%. So they're worried that consumers are not going to keep spending at the pace that they were. Meanwhile, their own costs are rising, including wages.
Right. Now, Caleb, this is actually the 5th time this year the Dow Jones has finished down more than 800 points in a day. Obviously, that can lead to a lot of stress and nerves for a lot of people who are watching their investments, thinking about their retirement. But what's your take on the overall market and where it's headed? What's your advice for people listening at home who are waking up stressed about this?
Yeah, everyone's stressed about it. And if you need the money you have in the stock market in the next year or two, the stock market was probably in the worst place for it to be right now. But you know what? Markets usually revert to the mean. And the mean is a rise of between 8 and 10% a year on average, going back 80 years. It's not going to happen in 2022. We're in a bear market. We're going to open the day with the S&P 500 down 20% from all-time highs. That said, at some point, stocks revert. Investors come back in, and we're going to get some sort of a rebound, but it's not going to be anytime soon. We could be in this slow, volatile environment for many months to come. For younger investors, great opportunity to pick up new stocks at a bargain price. For older investors, you want to pare back a little bit and think about maybe putting your money in cash or into value stocks, because that's where the action is. Super choppy, and it's going to be this way for a while.
All right, Caleb, we always appreciate the good, practical advice. Thank you so much.
Let's turn now to the war in Ukraine, where more soldiers who were trapped inside a Mariupol steel plant are surrendering to Russian forces. Russia's defense ministry now says since Monday, more than 1,700 fighters have surrendered. The soldiers have been taken to Russian-held territory, but there's uncertainty over what comes next. NBC News senior national correspondent Jay Gray has more from Lviv.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. And look, the focus continues to be on Mariupol and specifically the Azovstal steel plant, where the evacuation of Ukraine fighters does continue. Russian media now saying that there are more than 1,000 Ukraine troops that have surrendered their arms and have been taken into custody by Russian troops on the ground there. Amnesty International very concerned about the safety and well-being of those soldiers now in Russian custody, and has asked that the UN get involved to try and make sure that they are being treated properly. This is a situation that will continue to unfold over the next several days. As we've talked about, they are hoping here in Ukraine for a prisoner swap to bring those soldiers back into friendly territory. They call them heroes. Let's talk a little bit about the first war crime in this country. A 21-year-old Russian soldier pleading guilty to killing a 62-year-old man while he was riding his bike, said he did that after a command from his superior. He now faces a sentence of either 10 to 15 years in jail or life in prison. A three-judge panel is determining that. The Kremlin, though, they haven't been real engaged in this, haven't said anything specifically about this trial. And when it comes to the issue of war crimes by Russian troops, they say the reports are, quoting here, obvious fakes. That's the latest here in Ukraine. Back to you now.
Jay Gray, thank you so much.
For more on this, we want to bring in John Herbst. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and a senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. So I want to start with news that you are specifically uniquely qualified to talk about, which is the fact that the Senate has confirmed Bridget Brink as the new U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, of course, a position that you held, as I just mentioned. And this comes as the U.S. officially reopened its embassy in Kyiv. So talk to us about the kind of challenges she's going to face taking over this job in the middle of this war.
Correct. This is a really tough assignment, and I am as jealous as hell. This is what foreign service officers live for. She's a tough, strong, smart professional who will do an outstanding job, but she's going to have to provide Washington with very clear information about what's going on in Ukraine as Ukraine fights this massive Kremlin invasion and as Washington gears up unprecedented but absolutely necessary support to stop Russia, to beat Russia in Ukraine.
Absolutely. It's good to hear you say something like that, actually, because it just proves the type of people that are in these jobs want to be doing this work and are there to make it better to get through. So now we're almost 3 months into a war that really, I mean, I'm surprised to hear you say you're jealous that she's having to deal with this. But I mean, I think it proves your point that this is the type of thing that you live for. Now I want to ask you about sort of what we're seeing happening on the ground and the fact that a lot of this seems to be backfiring on Vladimir Putin and his plans. I mean, let's tick some of these reasons off. Russian troops are being forced back from positions in eastern Ukraine, including the second largest city, Kharkiv. The country's also been totally isolated, hammered with these sanctions. And then also we're now seeing formerly historically neutral Sweden and Finland set to join NATO. What is Putin's endgame at this point? And all of this stacking up, I mean, what does this mean for the Russian people?
You're exactly right that this new invasion of Ukraine, or 3-month-old invasion of Ukraine, is a strategic disaster for Russia and for Putin. Unfortunately, he's the guy who makes the decisions in Moscow, and he still seems to think he can subjugate Ukraine. He has not given up his goals, although he's adjusted them to focus on the East right now, although not very successfully. Until he's persuaded that he cannot win this on the ground militarily in Ukraine, this war is going to continue. And that's very sad for Ukraine especially, but also for Russian soldiers.
Oh, absolutely. Now, since the beginning of the war, many experts have noted the fact that the UN and EU have put forward this united front NATO, but strongman leaders from within those groups are pushing back. The president of Turkey blocked a vote to quickly move ahead with NATO membership for Finland and Sweden. The president of Hungary has rallied against an embargo of Russian oil. How much of an impact can these leaders have on the Western response? Or what does that mean, for example, as we're looking at Sweden potentially joining NATO?
First, I would distinguish between Erdogan in Turkey and Orban in Hungary. Orban has essentially been an agent of Putin over the last several years, I'm sorry to say. Erdogan is just a difficult and mercurial strongman. Erdogan wants to use Finland and Sweden as members of NATO as a way to get something from the West. So he's going to bargain for something. I'm sure that we'll make a deal. But I believe that we can manage the problems that Orban and Erdogan create as long as U.S. leadership is strong and active. So I'm confident that we'll be able to move policy the right way within NATO, and for that matter, the help with the EU.
Ambassador John Herbst, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Still too close to call this morning in Pennsylvania's Republican Senate primary. A little more than 1,200 votes separate Dr. Mehmet Oz from former Wall Street executive David McCormick. With 98% of the vote counted, the winner will face Democrat John Fetterman in November in what is expected to be one of the most competitive and expensive races this cycle. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns joins us now from a ballot counting facility in Delaware County. Dasha, good morning to you. So before that big general election matchup, we need a GOP nominee. So how many votes are left to count? Where are they coming from? And does the where tell us who those votes might go to?
All great questions, Joe. Good morning. I'm having some flashbacks to 2020, the last time we were talking about this and explaining the process here in Pennsylvania. So the vast majority of ballots left to count are mail-in ballots. Here in Pennsylvania, it's one of the few states that does not allow what's called pre-canvassing, which basically means preparing those mail-in ballots to be counted, opening up the envelopes, unfolding the ballots, getting them ready to get scanned. They can't start doing that here in Pennsylvania until 7 a.m. on Election Day. So those are the ballots that we're still waiting for. From what we know, about 15,000 or so mail-in ballots are still left to be counted. There's also some same-day vote left in Allegheny County on the western part of Pennsylvania and here in the Philadelphia area. Those day of votes are coming from some memory sticks that weren't necessarily taken out of the machines and delivered. Not anything to be concerned about. Just again, it's a human process. People take some time to get these things done. And there are also some provisional ballots left as well. To your question of what does this mean for who might get the lead, we really don't know. Look, McCormick has been leading in mail-in ballots, but will that be enough for him to actually overtake Oz? It's really hard to say. What we do know from every election official, every election expert that I've spoken with, it is very, very, very likely that this is headed into recount territory, Joe.
Thankfully, we have you, our human memory stick, who knows exactly how things work in Pennsylvania from the 2000 race. So I want to ask you, former President Trump is actually calling on his pick, Dr. Oz, to declare victory right now, even though, as you say, a recount's possible. Of course, Trump prematurely declared victory hours after the polls closed in 2020. So what are we actually hearing from the campaigns right now?
Yeah, again, deja vu. We're in Pennsylvania. We're waiting for mail-in ballots to be counted, and President Trump is trying to sow doubt in the process here again. Look, Oz has not yet declared victory in the way that Trump is telling him he should do, but both campaigns have certainly been signaling optimism. Take a listen to what both Oz and McCormick said on Fox News last night.
We have covered all counties to ensure that the ballots are correctly counted. This election is ours. We have done well. What I want to do today, though, is to talk about unifying our party, because those three front runners and their other candidates as well all work their tails off. But we need to unite to take on Fetterman, who you mentioned earlier. And I am praying that he makes a full recovery.
And our campaign had put a lot of energy and time into focusing on these absentee voters and focusing on our ground game. And so that has paid off big dividends. And there's a huge number of absentee ballots, which we're winning disproportionately. And that's why I have a lot of confidence I'm going to win this.
So, yeah, both signaling optimism, but no doubt both campaigns are preparing for a recount, Joe.
And Dasha, quickly, if this does go to a recount, what should we expect? How long does that take?
That's a great question. It could take a while. Both of these campaigns have spent millions and millions of dollars here, so they are not going to go down without a fight. And some election experts I've been speaking with say, look, because this is the most high-profile recount Pennsylvania will have ever had, things could get ugly, things could get contentious, and that could draw out the process. And election officials are always frustrated by recounts because it is using taxpayer money. It's rare that a recount actually turns up a different result. But in this case, we could be looking at potentially a couple hundred votes difference between these two candidates. And that's kind of in the territory where a recount could make a difference. Everything is up in the air right now, just as this race has been full of twists and turns from the start. The twists and turns continue even after Election Day. We could be looking at a couple more weeks potentially before we have a final outcome here.
I feel like it'll be a year of twists and turns. All right, Dasha Burns. Dasha, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Certainly. All right, now it's time for a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Michelle Grossman is with us. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And we're looking at that heat continuing once again in the south. I know, 90s and 100s.
Look at you, look like sunshine. It's perfect for it.
Well, can I tell a little secret? I just spilled my entire cup of coffee on my dress.
Your secret's safe with us.
Yeah, and the
entire cup of coffee on the dress. So
okay, well, it's on the back. We would have never known, but we love the honesty.
Felt like I had to tell you. You know,
I love it.
It smells.
That's what I would have done.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at the map today because we are looking at severe storms in the upper Midwest. We're going to see the chance of some hail, some damaging winds, also a few tornadoes. Record highs continue, 90s and 100s once again. We're going to see that through the early part of the weekend, and then we get a little bit of a break. A storm off to the Pacific Northwest. We're looking at higher elevation snow. That's going to move into the Rockies. We could see a lot of snow in the Rockies this weekend. And the morning rain in the Northeast, that's going to be moving out. Could be lingering too around lunchtime in some spots. So near record highs once again, 10 to 20 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. 92 in Memphis, 99 in Dodge City, 103 in Midland. So this is a wide swath of really warm air in place. Atlanta, we're looking at 93 and 90 degrees in Myrtle Beach. Certainly many of records are going to be broken today. Now, as we go throughout tomorrow, this expands to the Ohio Valley. So Cleveland, you're looking at 93. Your record is 91 tomorrow. Nashville, you're in the 90s. Atlanta, Charleston, also Richmond. And then by the weekend, Friday into Saturday, we are looking at really warm conditions in the Northeast. So as we look at New York City, temperatures in the mid-80s Saturday and Sunday. A cold front comes through. That's going to bring more comfortable conditions. Hot to not. I like that. Producer put that on there. 71 on Monday. And Raleigh, we're looking at temperatures into the 90s, 81 by Sunday. So here's your severe weather threat for today. 29 million people at risk. We have two areas where we're going to see the chance for severe weather. One is in the upper Midwest, and we do have an enhanced risk. That's where it's likely to see severe weather. La Crosse, Des Moines, you are included in that. Then we have a pretty large swath from St. Louis all the way to Nashville, Knoxville, Charlotte into Raleigh. Tomorrow, we're going to see 22 million people at risk. Again, winds gusting to 60 miles per hour, damaging hail, and also the chance for an isolated tornado. So this is a setup. We have a pair of cold fronts that are going to move through. First, we're going to see that first one bringing the storms in the southeast. That secondary cold front kind of takes hold tomorrow. It's going to be the more active one tomorrow, bringing a more dominant, bringing storms erupting from Michigan all the way to Texas. And then we'll see showers and storms, you guys, into the Ohio Valley on Saturday.
Wow. There's always a lot going on.
Yeah,
exactly. I like that from hot to not.
Yeah, I love it too. I was like, that's so cute. I just noticed it now. Worried about the coffee.
Your producers always have the cool stuff on the
Very
ground.
good.
Yeah. All right, Michelle, thanks. See you in a bit.
So
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.